They say mercy is a weakness on the frontier, that if you ever hesitate, just one seat might cost you everything. Your land, your life, your soul. I never believed it. Not until the night 200 warriors came riding out of the red dusk, and I realized I might have doomed an entire town with a bowl of stew and a warm blanket. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The day it all began, the Texas sky was bleeding. Not literally, of course, but the clouds were bruised purple and crimson, and the sun cast a hellish glow across the dry ridges like the world itself was burning slowly from the edges. I was out by the creek hammering down a fence post that had rotted clean through. It was the sort of job you do 1,000 times in a lifetime. The kind of chore that lets your mind wander. I wasn't thinking about war or blood or ancient rivalries. I was thinking about nails that wouldn't stay straight, and a stew that probably burned on the stove. And that's when I saw her. At first, I thought it was a coyote barely upright, staggering through the brush like something wounded. I reached for my rifle on instinct, but as I squinted through the heat shimmer, I saw 2 arms, small and human, legs trembling with every step. She moved like a ghost, barely clinging to this world, weaving through the sand and sagebrush. She was just a child, no older than 9. Her clothes were in tatters, her skin cracked from the sun, and her feet bare and bloody. The beads hanging from her torn dress caught the light Comanche design. Unmistakable. I knew what that meant. Every man out here did. I should have walked away. I should have locked my doors, loaded my rifle, and prayed she didn't die on my land. But something in me, something I didn't even know, was still alive, told me to stay. Maybe it was her eyes. Hollow, but sharp. Eyes that had seen too much, too fast. She collapsed just 10 feet from my fence line. I dropped my tools and ran to her. Her lips moved, dry as parchment. She tried to speak, but it wasn't English. Her hand made a motion toward her mouth, eating. I guessed, and then she pointed toward the creek. Her fingers fluttered like leaves in a dying wind. A plea. A warning. I couldn't tell which. I should have grabbed my rifle. That's what they teach you out here. But I didn't. I scooped her into my arms, and for a second, I thought she was already gone. Just a pile of bones and prayers wrapped in skin. She weighed less than my saddle. I brought her into my cabin. She didn't flinch when I set her in the chair by the fire. Didn't cry, didn't speak, just stared at me like she wasn't sure I was real. I grabbed the old stew pot and reheated what was left. Found a heel of bread from the day before, and set it all in front of her. The way she looked at it, like a candle lit inside her skull. She ate slow at first, cautious. Then like a storm, as if every second counted. That's when I saw it. Beneath the frayed edge of her collar, hanging low across her chest, was a necklace beaded, sacred, unmistakable. I'd seen one like it only once before. Silas Rower, the trapper up north, told me about it years ago. Said it belonged only to one bloodline, the family of Iron Wolf Comanche war chief feared from the Red River to the Pecos. The kind of man who could summon 100 blades with a single shout. A ghost in the stories of the settlers. My stomach turned to stone, because that meant this girl wasn't just any child. She was the daughter of the most dangerous man this side of the Mississippi. And I had her in my house, fed her, touched her, sheltered her. Which, by Comanche law, made me either her savior or her kidnapper. And the difference between the two was war. I moved to the window. The prairie was still, but the stillness had changed, like a breath being held. I looked back at her, now curled in my blanket, asleep with the bowl still warm in her lap. And I knew. I had just invited a storm into my home. You ever sit in a chair knowing that if you move, even breathe wrong, everything might fall apart? That's what it felt like that night. She was asleep in my cabin. A Comanche child. A war chief's daughter. And I sat across the room in the dark, hands trembling, staring at her as the last embers in the hearth flickered low. Every shadow felt like it had teeth. Every gust of wind outside sounded like hooves. The silence was thick enough to choke on. I hadn't lit a lantern. Didn't want anyone from the ridge catching a glimpse of her silhouette. I didn't even finish the stew. Just sat there, elbow on my knee, revolver in my lap, and the weight of what I'd done pressing hard against my chest. They were going to come. I didn't know when, but they would. You don't lose the daughter of Iron Wolf and not come looking. You don't just forgive that kind of mistake. I leaned forward and rubbed my face. What the hell was I thinking? Maybe I could have sent her away before anyone saw. Pointed her toward the ridge, left a canteen and some food, let the wilderness decide her fate. But that ship had sailed, she'd eaten, slept in my home, wore my blanket. In some tribes that meant she was under my protection, under my roof. A kind of bond that couldn't be undone by wishing it away. And I'd made that choice. In the early hours of morning, I heard the first hoofbeats distant, not from the hills, but from the west. Familiar. Too slow and uncertain to be warriors. I stepped onto the porch just as the sun began to stretch orange fingers across the plains. Dust rolled toward me, kicked up by 3 riders. Cletus Hartwell was in the lead. Red-faced, twitchy, hands gripping the reins like they might bite him. Behind him was Deputy Marshal Clay Morrison, rifle slung loose, and Reverend Thaddeus Price, white collar stained with sweat, face pale as salt. When they reached my porch, they didn't dismount. Cletus shouted first, "Bear! You damn fool! Tell me I didn't just hear what I think I heard." I raised a hand. "Keep your voice down. She's sleeping, ain't she?" Morrison said quietly. "Then it's true." The preacher crossed himself and shook his head. "Lord in heaven, come inside," I said. "If we're going to talk, let's talk where she can't hear." They hesitated, exchanging looks. Then, one by one, they tied their horses to the rail and followed me in. She was still sleeping, tucked tight into the chair, curled up like a pup. Her breathing was shallow but steady. I led them to the corner near the stove and told them everything. From the moment I saw her near the fence to when I noticed the beads around her neck, I left nothing out. "God Almighty," Cletus muttered. "You know what this means?" "Yeah," I said. "I do." "They'll burn this place to the ground," Morrison added, "and then they'll burn us next." "She came to me," I said. "I didn't steal her." "Doesn't matter," Cletus hissed. "You think Iron Wolf's gonna stop and ask for your side of the story?" Reverend Price looked like he wanted to disappear. "What if they're already riding? What if they take this as an act of war?" "They haven't come yet," I said. "Maybe we still got time." Morrison looked at the floor, jaw clenched. "I should ride back. Tell Sheriff Jensen. Tell the mayor. Give folks time to prepare." "Prepare for what?" I asked. "A massacre?" Cletus stepped forward. "Then bring her to them. Now, let them see you didn't mean harm. Maybe they'll believe it." "She can't even stand," I said. "And if I ride into a Comanche camp with their chief's daughter slumped over my horse, they'll kill me before I blink." "Then we're out of options," Morrison said. "Either you ride to Themor or they ride to us." Reverend Price put a hand on my shoulder. "You did what was right, son. But sometimes right ain't safe." They left not long after, riding hard toward town. I stayed behind. I sat in that cabin and watched her sleep. Wondered what her name was. Wondered what she'd seen. Wondered if she'd ever smile again. And then, as the sun dipped low again and shadows returned to stretch long across my land, I heard it. Not hoofbeats. Drums. Low, deep, rhythmic. The kind that shake your bones before they reach your ears. Not the loud, frantic call of a skirmish, but something slower, heavier. Wah drums. I rushed outside, climbed to the ridge near the barn, and that's when I saw them. Silhouettes at first. Lines forming on the horizon. Dozens. Then more. A wave of riders spilling across the land like nightfall. At the center of them, tall and still on a jet-black horse, was a figure I recognized from legend alone. Iron Wolf. He didn't carry a weapon, didn't need to. His presence was a blade all on its own. They came as one body, unified, disciplined, a war party, and they weren't waiting for dawn. I ran back to the cabin. She was awake, eyes wide. The drums had stirred her. She looked at me, then toward the door. Her lips moved, fast, in Comanche. I couldn't understand her words, but I understood the fear. She pointed to herself, then to the land beyond the window, then slashed her fingers across her throat. "They're coming for you?" I asked. She shook her head. "For me?" She nodded. I grabbed my coat and stepped toward the door. My revolver sat by the hearth. I didn't pick it up. Some fights can't be won with bullets. When I opened the door, I saw the line had formed just outside the fence, no closer. A wall of horses and faces painted with fury. The sun had vanished. Only moonlight remained. And at the center, Iron Wolf dismounted. He walked forward alone. I met him halfway, hands raised, heart thundering. He didn't speak right away, just looked past me, toward the cabin, toward his daughter. Then, in perfect English, he said, "You took what is not yours." I didn't answer. "You fed her," he added. "Gave her shelter." "Why?" "She was dying," I said. "I couldn't just let her." His eyes narrowed. "Mercy is not free." "No," I said. "But it shouldn't cost a life either." Behind him, 100 warriors gripped their weapons. "She wore the beads of my house," he said. "You knew who she was. And still, you kept her." "She couldn't travel," I said. "I planned to return her in the morning." He stared at me for a long moment, then looked past me again. And in that moment, she stepped outside. The girl stood barefoot, trembling, but tall. She walked slowly to my side, and she didn't hide behind me. She stood beside me, and for the first time, Iron Wolf's face cracked, not with rage, but something else. Recognition. Some sounds don't need words. The war drums had stopped, but their echoes still pulsed inside my skull. Even the wind seemed to move differently, slower, heavier, like it was carrying the weight of something sacred and dangerous. The kind of silence that happens right before lightning strikes. I stood face to face with Chief Iron Wolf. He towered like he'd been carved out of the earth itself. His eyes weren't wild. No, they were worse, calm, cold. That kind of quiet rage you don't beg mercy from, because you know mercy's already left the room. But then, she stepped forward. The girl, her small fingers still clutching the edge of my coat, but she wasn't hiding anymore. She was showing him she was here by choice. Her presence changed the air, not soft or just, different, like she'd peeled open a space between two worlds and forced them to look at each other. He looked at her long and hard. Then he looked at me again. "She did not die," he said slowly. "That is the only reason you still breathe." He turned his back on me, walked back to his horse, mounted with a kind of stillness I'll never understand. Then he raised his arm and the war party turned as one. But they didn't leave. They just shifted, repositioned, formed a circle, not of attack, but of watch. And then, one final sentence from the chief, "At dawn we decide." They were camping on my land, waiting for the sun to judge me. I took the girl back inside, hands still shaking. She was quiet now, eyes unfocused, but I could see the storm brewing behind them. That little body carried a weight no child should. And I couldn't stop thinking, what if she hadn't come to me? What if I'd turned her away? Shot her by mistake? What kind of fire would have scorched this land if Mercy hadn't stood on my porch that day? Sleep never came. I sat by the hearth again, gun on the table, stew untouched. Just after midnight, there was a knock on the door. A soft one. I opened it slowly. It was Cletus. And behind him, a crowd. Not warriors, not Comanche. Townsfolk. Half the damn county must have ridden out. Men with rifles, women with torches. Sheriff Jensen. Reverend Price. Even old widow McGrady from the Mercantile, holding a lantern in one hand and a pitchfork in the other. "You seen them?" Cletus asked. "They're all over the ridge." "I know," I said. "They ain't attacked yet." "They're waiting," I replied. "Waiting for what?" "For morning." That didn't comfort him. "Bear," he said quietly, stepping close. "We can't let 'em decide this. We have to strike first. While they sleep." My stomach turned. "No. Listen to me," he growled. "You brought this here. You sheltered her. You made your damn choice. Now we're gonna pay for it unless we finish it tonight. She's a child. She's the chief's child. That's the problem. The crowd behind him murmured. The sheriff looked torn, shifting his weight from foot to foot like he was standing on hot coals. Bear, he said, I've known you a long time. You've always been stubborn, but you're not stupid. If they come at us, we can't win. You know that. Then don't start a fight, I said. They're camped on your land, Cletus hissed. That makes this your war, whether you want it or not. I looked past them. Some of the men I recognized. Ranchers, blacksmiths, drunks, farmers. Some I didn't. They had that look in their eyes, the kind that comes when fear turns to anger. That's a dangerous kind. The kind that needs a target. If you fire the first shot, I said, voice like gravel, you'll doom this whole valley. We're already doomed, someone muttered. And that's when the girl stepped onto the porch. Her bare feet touched the boards without a sound. She stood behind me, eyes locked on the crowd, not afraid. Just steered. Her presence hit them like a slap. You could see it in their faces, the way some lowered their rifles, the way others turned away. She don't look dangerous, one woman whispered. She looks sick, another said. And that was when it started to shift, just slightly. She's just a child, Cletus spat. It don't matter, they'll burn us anyway. I don't think they will, the sheriff said quietly. What? They haven't yet, he added. And they've had all the reason to, because they're waiting to do it at dawn, Cletus barked. No, the sheriff shook his head. Because maybe they're waiting to see what we'll do. And just like that, the crowd's anger fractured. Some still held their rifles high. Others lowered them. A few just stood in silence. Go home, I told them. Go back to your families. Cletus didn't budge. If she stays here, you'll get us all killed. She's under my roof, I said. That means she's under my protection. And that was that. They turned. Some reluctantly, some grumbling. But they left. All but one. The preachers stayed. She reminds me of my daughter, he said, staring at the girl. She died when she was 6. Fever took her in a night. He paused, voice cracking. You did the right thing, Bear, even if it costs us. Then he left too. The rest of the night was long and silent. She fell asleep again, curled up with my coat. I sat by the window and waited. Just before dawn, the drums returned, but not the war kind. These were slower, heavier, like a heartbeat in the soil. And then the horses returned, not to attack, but to escort. When I stepped outside, Iron Wolf was waiting. You will come, he said. Alone? He nodded. I need her. She comes too. We rode east. Through the canyon path settlers feared to follow. Through the forest trails marked only by broken stones and feathers. The girl rode beside me, silent, but her eyes were alert, watchful. And when we reached their camp deep, hidden, sacred, I understood why they brought me. Because this wasn't about me anymore. It was about her, and about what her voice might mean to both our peoples. They didn't blindfold me. They didn't bind my hands. But as we rode into the canyon and deeper into the folds of land untouched by white boots, I realized something far more unnerving. They trusted me just enough not to. Or maybe they wanted me to see everything, to understand what I was risking with every breath I took in their world. The air changed as we crossed the third ridge. Warmer. Still. Even the birds stopped singing like they knew they weren't welcome past this point. The trees thickened. Not tall but ancient. Twisted trunks marked with symbols I didn't recognize but understood in my bones this was sacred land. She rode beside me, the girl. Still silent. Still watching. Not a single warrior spoke. Not a whisper passed between them. But their presence was heavy, like ghosts riding on horseback. I counted 30, then stopped. It didn't matter. They weren't here to fight. Not yet. After an hour, the land opened up. A wide basin, hemmed in by stone walls that curved like a natural amphitheater. Fires burned in steady rings, 7 of them. 7 flames for 7 elders. And all around, quiet faces stared out from tents made of stretched hides and bone. No movement. No greeting. Just judgment. I dismounted when they did. not waiting to be told. My legs stiff from the ride. My boots sank into the red clay as I followed them into the center ring. There, in a circle of stones blackened with old ash, stood the council. 7 men. Each one so old I half wondered if they still drew breath. Their skin was as wrinkled as river bark, eyes sunken but sharp. They sat cross-legged, unmoving, like carved gods watching the sins of mortals. Iron Wolf stood behind me, silent. The girl stood at my side, no longer holding my coat. They made me stand in the center. No one told me what to do. No one needed to. One of the elders lifted his hand, and the drums began again. Not loud, not warlike. Just slow, steady beats like the heartbeat of the earth itself. Then the questioning began, but not with words. One of them pointed at me, another at the girl. Then 2 fingers together. I understood. Why did I bring her? I answered the only way I knew how. She came to my land, I said, my voice dry as the dirt beneath my boots. Starving, weak, she didn't ask for help, but she needed it, so I gave it. No reaction. The next elder leaned forward, lifted a stick from the fire beside him, and drew a single shape in the dirt at his feet. A bow. He stared at me. I nodded slowly. Yes, I said. I own one. For protection. He drew a second symbol beside I-10 arrow, striking a figure. A question. Did I use it on her? No, I said firmly. Never. I couldn't. The girl stepped forward then. For the first time since we arrived, she moved with confidence. She knelt beside the elder's drawing and used her finger to wipe away the arrow. Then she looked at him and nodded. The elder looked at her, then at me. His eyes narrowed. He understood. She was speaking for me now, and they were listening. Another elder rose slowly, bones cracking like dry branches. He walked around the fire and stopped directly in front of me. He lifted his hand-open palm, then slowly closed it into a fist. A warning. Then he pointed to the girl again, and made a motion across his throat. The meaning was clear. You should have let her die. The words hit me like a hammer. I shook my head. I couldn't. The elder's eyes locked onto mine. You should have, he said. His English was broken but clear. Would have saved lives, saved peace. One child is not worth war. I didn't answer, because I didn't agree. But I also understood. To them, she wasn't just a child. She was a spark, and I'd let her burn on my porch. The firelight shifted. The wind picked up, and from the shadows emerged a new figure, broken lance, younger than the rest, built like stone and twice as hard. His face was a map of scars, his eyes full of fire. He stepped into the circle without asking. The elders didn't stop him. He stood beside me and drew his blade, not to use but to place it in the dirt, point down. A challenge of words, not steel. Then he spoke, not to me, but to them. His voice was thunder, harsh, clipped, fast. I couldn't understand the words, but I felt their weight. The way the warriors around us shifted. The way the women behind the tents peeked out like prairie dogs sensing danger. His voice was fear turned into flame. He didn't want peace. He wanted blood. And I was the vessel he meant to pour it from. Then the girl stepped forward again. She walked between us, no hesitation, no trembling. She stood directly in front of Broken Lance. He stared down at her like she was a gnat in his path. And then she spoke, not loud, not angry, but with the calm, ringing truth of someone who had nothing left to lose. She pointed to her ribs, then mimed hunga, then to her mouth chewing, then to me, then to the sky, then back to the fire. She didn't use words. She didn't need them. I fed her. I sheltered her. And I asked for nothing. She looked at Broken Lance and tilted her head. Then slowly, she lifted her hand and placed it on his chest. Not in threat, but in memory. She was reminding him of something. Maybe his own child. Maybe his own hunger. I don't know. But I watched his eyes change. From stone to glass. He stepped back. Didn't bow, didn't nod. But he walked away. And in this place, that was as good as surrender. Iron Wolf finally spoke. "She speaks for you now," he said. I nodded. "She says," he added slowly, "you are no threat." The elders murmured. Not agreement, not rejection, just thought. The oldest among them raised one gnarled hand. Silence fell like a hammer. He stared at me, long and hard. Then he said a single sentence. Iron Wolf translated, "You must stay." I blinked. "What?" "You will not return." "Not yet," he said. "Tonight, we decide." I wanted to argue, but he didn't. I looked at the girl. She nodded. And I understood. This wasn't my choice anymore. They gave me a tent. Not a prison. Not chains. Just a small hide tent near the edge of the circle, away from the warriors but not out of sight. A gesture of restraint wrapped in courtesy. I was still their guest, but also their problem. The fire outside burned low as night fully swallowed the sky. Stars pierced the dark, 1,000 cold witnesses watching the land below. I sat cross-legged on a woven mat, staring at nothing, ears straining for any clue of what might come next. I wasn't used to stillness. Not like this. At home, the silence of the ranch came with rhythm wind in the grass, the distant lowing of cattle, creaks from the barn roof. This silence was different, heavier, like the land itself was holding its breath. The girl had brought me food earlier, a flat cake made of maize and something like wild onions. I hadn't been hungry until she handed it to me. Then I devoured it like I hadn't eaten in days. She sat with me briefly, just for a moment, her eyes full of something I couldn't quite name: pride, worry, hope, maybe all three. Then she left, and I was alone again. I lay back, staring at the hide ceiling of the tent, thinking about every mistake that had led me here. About Sarah. About Daniel, my wife and son. Gone 3 winters now. Cholera came like a thief in the night, stole my whole world before I could fetch a doctor. There was nothing I could do. I buried them on the hill, beneath the old oak that never bloomed. After that, I stopped living and started surviving. Until she showed up half-starved and trembling at my fence post. And now I was here, waiting to learn whether I'd live or die for offering her food. The irony made me laugh, but it caught in my throat like a splinter. I must have drifted to sleep because when I opened my eyes again, the fire outside was dead. But something else burned. Dreams, or maybe visions. I saw Sarah's face, not smiling, not angry, just looking at me. Then Daniel, his little hands reaching for mine across a field of smoke. I tried to run to them. My legs wouldn't move. The wind whispered through the tent. Not cold, but meaningful. I heard voices outside. Not loud. Not angry. Whispers. The council. They were still awake. Still debating. I stepped out into the night. No one stopped me. The camp lay silent but alert. Warriors moved like shadows at the edges of the firelight. Mothers tucked children under thick blankets. Old men smoked and stared into coals, remembering other nights like this. And in the center, the council sat. 7 still shapes around the embers, unmoving. I didn't approach, just watched from afar. Then I saw her. The girl, sitting beside her father, now Chief Iron Dog. She looked up and saw me. Then she did something I didn't expect. She smiled and patted the ground beside her. He hesitated. Then walked. The warriors didn't block me. The chief didn't move. I sat, not beside him, but close enough to see his eyes, feel the weight of him. His daughter reached out and took my hand. It was cold, not with fear but clarity. She whispered something I couldn't understand. Iron Dog translated, his voice like gravel and thunder. She says, "You remind her of the wind before a storm. Quiet, strong, afraid of what it brings." He didn't speak. Then Iron Dog looked at me. Really looked. No hate, just weariness. "She asks me," he continued, "why I brought warriors to your land if she was already safe." His words hung there like smoke. I didn't answer. I didn't know how. I tell her, he went on, because men like me cannot afford to believe in miracles. We have seen too many false ones. He looked away. She believes you are not false. He swallowed hard. Then he added something I'll never forget. She believes you are what comes after blood. I sat in silence. The fire cracked once, and an ember popped. I could feel the eyes of others watching us from their tents. This wasn't just a conversation anymore. It was something bigger. Like the air itself had taken a side. Iron Dog rose slowly. His daughter stood with him. You must rest, he said. Tomorrow the elders will speak, and the wind will choose whether it carries your name or scatters your bones. He didn't say it as a threat. It was just a truth. I nodded, walked back to the tent, but he didn't sleep. I sat there all night, watching the stars move across the sky, wondering how many had made this journey before me. How many had walked into a world not theirs, and left it change or never left at all. When dawn finally arrived, it didn't rise with music or noise, just the slow spilling of gold across the peaks. But even that felt like judgment. The time had come, and the fire in the center of the camp began to burn again. The circle of judgment had opened, and I was no longer just a man who gave a girl food. I was the storm they had to reckon with. The dawn crept quietly over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of fire and blood. The warriors, once shadows in the night, now stood tall and tense beneath the growing light. Their faces were painted with symbols of war and tradition, eyes burning with questions and fears that had no easy answers. I was led, or rather escorted, to the council ring, the heart of the Comanche's ancient justice. 7 elders sat in a half-circle around a roaring fire. Their faces were maps of battles, loss, and wisdom carved deep by time and sorrow. These were men who had lived through broken treaties, massacres, and betrayals. They did not look kindly upon mercy, at least, that's what I thought. Iron Dog sat in the center, his black horse's feathers still woven through his dark hair, a living symbol of power and respect. His daughter stood beside him, calm but unyielding. The weight of what was about to unfold pressed down on me like the Texas heat I had left behind. No words had been exchanged since last night's uneasy peace. Now, all eyes turned toward me. Iron Dog's voice was low, but carried like thunder. You have brought danger to our people, he began. Not by blade or bow, but by breaking the laws that keep us safe. The elders nodded, murmurs rippling like wind through the dry grass. I will speak for the white man, his daughter said suddenly. Her voice was clear, ringing out above the murmurs, surprising everyone. He saved me when I was lost. He fed me when my hunger was too deep for words. He gave me shelter when the night was colder than death. The crowd hushed, the flames flickering shadows across their faces. Iron Dog looked at his daughter, pride and conflict warring in his eyes. And yet, he said, the laws are not ours alone. They bind all who live on this land. One elder, the oldest among them, a man with silver hair that shone like the moon, spoke next. His voice was gravel and age. We remember too well the promises made by your people. Promises broken like dry twigs beneath horses' hooves. Mercy is a luxury we cannot afford. Another elder, younger but scarred, slammed his fist on a wooden staff. He has no right to interfere. We are warriors, not caretakers. We must defend our people. Blood must be answered with blood. The tension cracked like thunder, warriors murmured, some nodding fiercely, others shifting uneasily. Iron Dog raised his hand, demanding silence. This is why we have gathered, to judge the man who crossed our path and to decide whether his heart is strong enough to walk alongside us. He swallowed hard. The girl stepped forward. Justice is not only retribution, she said softly, eyes locked on the crowd. It is balance. It is mercy when deserved. He chose to save me, not for gain, but because he could not turn away. A few warriors exchanged looks. Some lowered their weapons slightly. Broken Lance, the warrior who had challenged his chief before, stepped forward. And what of the fear he has brought upon us? His kindness could be weakness, and weakness will kill us all. The girl's eyes burned with quiet fire. If kindness is weakness, she said, then we are all doomed. But if mercy can save lives, then it is the greatest strength we have. A murmur rose from the crowd, disbelief mixed with something like hope. Iron Dog's gaze settled on me. Do you stand by your choice, white man, knowing that this path may lead to your death? I felt the heat of every pair of eyes, the weight of every story untold. I do, I said simply, because sometimes the right choice is the hardest one. The eldest elder nodded slowly. Then you will come with us to the village. There, the final judgment will be made. The warriors formed a corridor, and we began the slow march toward the Comanche village. Along the way, the girl remained silent but close. Her presence was a balm in the harsh landscape of uncertainty. At the village, fires burned brighter, and families gathered, whispering, watching. The council met again, elders debating, voices rising and falling like the desert wind. I stood at the center, the girl by my side, the eyes of the tribe upon us. Then came the moment. The chief's daughter raised her voice. She told of her journey, the hunger, the fear, the hope that a stranger would help. She told of my choice not out of duty, but out of humanity. Her words carved through the silence like an arrow finding its mark. The elders listened. Some hardened, some softened. Finally, the eldest spoke. The spirits test us not by battle alone, but by the choices we make in the quiet moments. He looked at me. You are not just a man. You are a bridge. The room breathed relief, and a new understanding settled in. But the peace was fragile, because the winds of the plains carry whispers of the past, and old wounds do not heal overnight. The night before the council's judgment lingered heavy in the air like a storm waiting to break. The village had settled into a restless quiet, fires burning low but hearts burning bright. I lay awake on the hard ground beneath the canvas of stars, the weight of what had happened pressing deep into my chest. The girl's presence was a small comfort, her breathing steady as she slept beside me, wrapped in a blanket that smelled faintly of pine and earth. Yet, even as the fire's glow danced over the faces of the warriors who'd guarded us, I could sense the undercurrents pulling at this fragile peace. I was an outsider, a man from a world that had spilled blood and broken promises on this land for generations. The warriors did not trust easily, and while the girl's words had sown a seed of hope, the shadows of history stretched long and dark. I thought about the stories I'd heard growing up, the legends told by my own father by the fireplace, tales of conflict and kinship tangled together like vines. The truth was never simple. The settlers who came westward brought plows and guns, but they also carried fear and ignorance. The tribes had survived through brutality and resilience, yet the scars they bore were deep, etched into the soil and spirit alike. In the stillness, I replayed every moment since the girl had appeared at my rancher frail body, the sacred beads glinting beneath her torn dress, the desperate plea in her eyes. I'd never imagined that saving one child could shake the foundations of an entire world, but here I was, caught in the middle of something far greater than myself. The morning light crept slowly through the trees, casting long shadows over the village. The elders gathered again, their faces set like stone, eyes narrowing with the weight of their decisions. I watched from a distance as they whispered among themselves, their voices hushed but urgent. The girl stood tall, no longer the frightened child from the creek, but a symbol of courage and hope. The day stretched on, the sun climbing higher but the tension refusing to ease. I wandered the outskirts of the village, observing the wary glances exchanged between warriors and families alike. The air was thick with memories of battles fought, loved ones lost, and promises broken. I could feel the weight of those histories pressing down like an invisible hand. Later, I found myself near the edge of the plains, where the wind whispered through the tall grasses like the voices of ancestors long gone. I closed my eyes and let the wind carry my fears and hopes alike. The land here was sacred, a witness to countless stories of survival and sacrifice. I thought of the girl's father, Iron Dog's strength, his honor, and the fierce love that bound him to his people. He was not just a warrior. He was the heart of a tribe struggling to hold on to its identity in a changing world. The evening brought the council's verdict. I stood before the elders, the girl beside me, waiting for the judgment that would decide my fate. The silence in the circle was almost unbearable, broken only by the crackling fire and the distant howl of a lone coyote. The eldest elder's voice finally broke through, slow and deliberate. He spoke of tradition and the delicate balance between justice and mercy. He acknowledged the courage it took to stand with the girl and the risks I had accepted by defying the unspoken rules. The council's decision was not unanimous. Some warriors still urged caution. Others advocated for forgiveness. In the end, it was clear that the choice was not mine alone to bear. The elders declared that I would be under the tribe's protection, a rare and precarious honor. I was to live among them, to learn their ways, and to prove that trust could be earned. The girl's hand found mine, a silent promise that we would face whatever came next together. As the night deepened, I watched the village settle into uneasy peace. Fires burned bright, but the future remained uncertain. I knew that the path ahead would be fraught with challenged. Old enemies would not rest, and the scars of the past would not heal quickly. But for the first time, there was a flicker of hope, a chance that two worlds long divided could find a way to walk side by side. I thought of my own land, my neighbors waiting with suspicion and fear. How would I explain this journey, the choices I had made? Could they understand that mercy was not weakness, but strength? Only time would tell. For now, I embraced the stillness, the quiet courage that had brought me this far. The girl's presence was a beacon in the darkness, a reminder that even in the harshest of landscapes, life could take root and grow. The sun would rise again, and with it, a new chapter written not in blood, but in the fragile ink of peace. The days that followed the council's decision were unlike anything I'd ever imagined. Life in the village moved with a rhythm that felt ancient and sacred, but beneath the surface, a storm brewed. The peace we'd been granted was fragile, a thin veneer stretched over old wounds and simmering tensions. I could feel it in the way the warriors exchanged glances, in the hushed conversations that stopped when I approached, and in the heavy silence that fell whenever the girl's name was mentioned. The girl herself, no longer a frightened child, but a beacon of quiet strength, was my guide through this world I barely understood. She moved with purpose, her every step echoing the weight of her bloodline and the responsibility it carried. There was no mistaking the power she held, not just in the eyes of the tribe, but in the way the land seemed to respond around Harris if even the wind bent to her will. I spent hours learning the customs, the stories, the unspoken rules that govern this place. The elders watched me closely, their expressions unreadable, while the warriors tested me in ways that had nothing to do with words. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I found myself at the edge of the council fire, watching shadows dance across faces etched with the scars of survival and loss. But not all eyes welcomed me. Among the warriors, there was a man named Broken Lance, the younger warrior who had challenged Iron Dog in the council. His gaze was sharp, like a hawk's, and it followed me everywhere. I knew his heart was heavy with doubt and anger. To him, I was still an outsider, a white man who had crossed a sacred line. He whispered among the others, sowing seeds of discord, his voice a low rumble beneath the surface. The girl had warned me about him, her eyes darkening whenever his name was mentioned. Broken Lance believed that mercy was weakness, that the tribe's survival depended on strength and unforgiving justice. His words carried weight among the younger warriors, stirring old fears that threatened to unravel everything we'd built. One night, I overheard a meeting in the longhouse. The words were sharp, cutting through the thick smoke like arrows. "They say mercy makes us soft," Broken Lance said, voice cold. "This man brings danger, weakness. If Iron Dog shows weakness, our enemies will devour us." Another voice, quieter but no less firm, replied, "And what is strength if it blinds us?" The girl's courage brought peace. It is our choice, war or honor. I felt the weight of their debate as if it pressed against my chest. The tribe was torn and I was caught in the middle. Days later, as the sun burned high and the air shimmered with heat, news came that a small group of settlers near the border had been attacked. The wounds were fresh scorched earth, broken homes, lives lost. Whispers blamed the tribe's unrest, accusing us of harboring warhawks like Broken Lance. I knew the truth was murkier, tangled in fear and mistrust on both sides. The girl held my hand tightly as we rode through the village. Her eyes scanned the horizon, alert and fierce. "They don't see the danger coming," she said in her soft voice, "but it is here." She was right. The peace we fought to build was fragile, and the past was never far behind. That night, the wind carried strange sounds, a distant rumble of hooves, the murmurs of men gathering. Broken Lance had taken a group of warriors beyond the village, their intentions unclear but their hearts burning with a restless fire. I feared what might come if the fragile balance shattered. I spent the hours before dawn sitting by the fire, the girl asleep beside me, her face serene despite the turmoil around us. I thought about the journey that had brought us here, the choice I'd made to save her, the battles fought not with guns but with courage, the line between enemy and friend blurring like smoke on the wind. As the first light crept through the trees, a sudden commotion stirred the village. Warriors returned, faces grim and eyes filled with shadows. Broken Lance had led a raid, striking a nearby settlement in a reckless act of defiance. The cost was high, more lives lost, more hatred sown. The council gathered once more, the weight of Broken Lance's actions pressing down like a stone. Iron Dog's expression was heavy with sorrow, his voice steady but filled with the burden of leadership. "This path leads only to blood," he said, eyes scanning the faces before him. "We must hold fast to what we have built, or all will be lost." I stood beside the girl, feeling the truth of his words deep within me. The war was not over, not by a long shot, but there was still a chance for peace if we could find the strength to rise above fear and vengeance. The days turned into weeks, and I found myself drawn deeper into the tribe's life. I learned their language, their ways, their stories of survival and hope. The girl taught me to listen not just to words, but to the silence between them. We shared moments of quiet understanding, the kind that crosses the divide between worlds. But the shadow of Broken Lance loomed large. His defiance had fractured the tribe's unity, and I feared it was only a matter of time before the fragile peace shattered completely. One evening, as the sun bled red across the sky, the girl took my hand and led me to a place sacred to her people's circle of ancient stones, where the wind whispered secrets of the past. She looked at me with fierce determination. "We cannot let fear win," she said. "The tribe must choose. War or peace. I choose peace." Her words settled over me like a flame in the darkness, a beacon of hope against the gathering storm. The battle ahead would not be fought with guns or arrows, but with hearts and minds. And I knew, deep in my soul, that I would stand by her side no matter the cost. The air was thick with tension, every breath heavy with the weight of what was to come. I had never felt such silence before, not the peaceful kind, but the kind that screams before the storm. The village held its collective breath, teetering on the edge of a knife that could slice everything apart in an instant. Broken Lance's betrayal had shattered the fragile peace like a stone thrown into still water. The raid had ignited old grudges, fear, and fury that threatened to consume us all. I saw it in the faces of the warriors, some hardened by years of battle, others young and wide-eyed, caught in a world they barely understood but felt destined to fight for. Iron Dog sat like a mountain among the council, his face carved with the lines of age and pain. Yet his eyes burned with unwavering resolve. His voice was steady as he addressed the tribe, but even he could not hide the weariness beneath. "We stand at the edge of darkness," he said, "but the choice is ours. To fall into war's endless fire or to reach across the divide and seize the fragile thread of peace." The girl, his daughter, stood beside him, her posture regal yet fiercely a living symbol of what was at stake. She was no longer the scared child I'd rescued. She was the voice of reason and hope, the embodiment of the future her people could have. Yet, the ghosts of the past clawed at every heart. Broken Lance's faction grew restless, their voices rising in fierce chants that echoed across the plains. They saw mercy as weakness, peace as surrender. Their fury was a wildfire threatening to burn the land to ashes. I watched as the girl moved among the people, her words a balm and a spark. She spoke of unity, of honor, of the strength found not in weapons but in compassion. Her presence stirred something ancient, a memory of a time before bloodshed and hatred took root. But words alone could not quell the storm. One night, as the moon hung low and silver in the sky, a messenger arrived breathless and wild-eyed. News had come that a band of settlers, armed and angry, were marching toward the village, fueled by rumors and fear. They came ready for battle, expecting to find enemies and vengeance. The village erupted into chaos. Warriors readied their weapons, faces painted for war, hearts pounding with the roar of impending conflict. The girl's voice rose above the clamor, calm but urgent. "We will not be the ones to ignite this war," she declared. "We must show them that peace is possible, that we are not enemies but neighbors." I could see the doubt flicker in Iron Dog's eyes, the struggle within him between the fierce protector and the weary leader. He nodded slowly, and the decision was made. A small group, led by the girl and myself, would ride out to meet the settlers. It was a fragile step on a razor's edge, but the only chance we had to prevent bloodshed. The ride was tense, every sound magnified in the still night. The settlers waited at the edge of the woods, rifles ready, eyes sharp with suspicion. I could feel the hatred and fear radiating from them, the scars of losses past driving them to the brink. The girl stepped forward, her voice clear and strong as she spoke words I barely understood but felt in every fiber of my being. She spoke of shared pain, of hopes for a future without violence, of the common ground that bound us all. The settlers hesitated, the hard lines on their faces softening as they listened. Slowly, weapons lowered, tension easing like the first thaw of winter. In that moment, I realized the true power of what we'd fought for. It was not the strength of swords or guns, but the courage to hope, to forgive, and to walk toward each other instead of away. The days that followed were not easy. Old wounds reopened, distrust lingered like a shadow, and the path to peace was strewn with challenges. But the girl, Iron Dog, and I worked tirelessly building bridges, sharing stories, and weaving a new future from the threads of understanding. Broken Lance's faction resisted, their fire dimming but never fully extinguished. Yet even they could not ignore the quiet strength of a tribe united, nor the growing respect from the settlers who saw the girl not as an enemy, but as a leader worthy of honor. Years passed, and what began as a fragile truce blossomed into something greater, a community forged from the ashes of conflict, bound by respect and the shared dream of peace. The girl grew into a woman of legend, her name spoken with reverence by both tribes and settlers. She became a bridge between worlds, a living testament to the power of mercy and courage. And I stayed by her side, a man changed forever by the choice to see beyond fear and hatred. When I think back to that fateful day, the day I found a starving child on my land, I see not just a moment of mercy, but the spark that ignited a legacy. A legacy that proved some stories don't need bloodshed to echo through time. Some stories only need the bravery of one man and the courage of a child to change the course of history. The first light of dawn broke slowly over the horizon, painting the sky with hues of amber and rose. But it wasn't just another sunrise, it was the dawn of a new era, born from the ashes of fear, conflict, and uncertainty. I stood on the porch of my old ranch, the land stretching out in quiet stillness before me. Beside me, the girl, the warrior who had once been a child trembling at my doorstep now stood tall and proud. Her eyes, fierce and wise beyond her years, scanned the horizon with a calm assurance that spoke of hard-won peace. The village behind us buzzed with life, a harmony forged between two worlds that had once seemed destined to collide. Children of both settlers and Comanche played side by the creek where she had collapsed months ago, the scars of past battles softened by time and healing. Iron Dog's legacy lived on not in weapons or war cries, but in the strength of unity. He had passed quietly in his sleep, a warrior finally at rest. Yet his vision endured in his daughter's work, and in the hearts of those who dared to believe peace was more powerful than hatred. That day, as the sun rose fully and cast its golden light over the land, we gathered tribesmen, settlers, neighbors around a fire that no longer symbolized war, but community. Words were shared, laughter echoed, and old wounds began to close with every story told and every hand shaken. I caught her gaze, and in that silent moment, I knew. This was the promise we had fought for. This was the peace that had seemed impossible on that first desperate night. Years would come and go, seasons would change, but the story of a lone cowboy who saved a starving girl, who stood firm against the tide of violence and fear, that story would live forever. Because sometimes it only takes one choice, one act of kindness, to turn the tide of history. And maybe that's the greatest legend of all. If you've been moved by this tale of courage, sacrifice, and the power of mercy, don't just watch, join us. Subscribe to Dust and Destiny for more unforgettable stories that dive deep into the hearts of unlikely heroes and the battles that shape our world. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and become part of a community that cherishes bravery, honor, and hope. Your next great adventure awaits. Are you ready to ride into legend with us?